They're often called the forgotten refugees, a group of more than 850,000 Jews who were kicked out of the Arab world or fled from state-sponsored persecution after the State of Israel was founded.
After we, the Jewish leadership, accepted the partition plan of the United Nations of Jewish state and Arab state, and the Arabs refused it, there was a call by the Arab League to strip the Jews from their citizenship, to confiscate their assets and their possessions, and many also were killed.
It's what some historians call the Arab world's double war on the Jewish state. One was fought on the battleground, the other at home against the nearly 1 million Jews who had lived for hundreds of years in Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Syria, Tunisia, Yemen, Morocco, and Algeria.
The vast majority of refugees, Jewish refugees of Arab lands, were forcibly expelled in mass acts from their homes in Arab countries in 1948 after the establishment of the State of Israel. In fact, hundreds of thousands were expelled, the vast majority, but I'd say about 750,000, 600,000 were expelled in 48, and another 300,000 between 48 and 76.
The plight of these Arab Jewish refugees never made world headlines for very long. That's because nearly 70% of them went to Israel, where they were quickly integrated. But their expulsion from Arab countries was filled with abuse and violence. Most left wealthy communities with no more than a suitcase in their hand. The Arab governments are estimated to have seized between what would be today the equivalent of $5 to $10 billion of assets from the Arab Jewish refugees. At this first ever conference called Justice for Jewish Refugees from Arab Countries, the Israeli government and the World Jewish Congress are demanding recognition of the crimes committed and compensation.
It is very important, first and foremost, from a moral point of view of correcting a wrong, correcting a travesty of more than 64 years, that the tragedy of more than 850,000 Jews from Arab countries, this tragedy was not mentioned enough, was not brought up to the fore, and certainly this was a dismissal of basic rights and of justice. So it's important, and it's never too late.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is supporting the cause more than any of his predecessors. He recorded a message for the conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Israel is fully committed to ensuring that the Jewish refugee issue is not forgotten. And that is why we decided in 2009 to implement a nationwide program to document the stories of these refugees and their families. And this is why I've raised this issue everywhere, from here in Jerusalem to Washington to just about every capital that I've been to.
Levana Zamir, who was born in Cairo, came to the conference to tell her harrowing story. She was 10 years old on May 16, 1948, the day the State of Israel was declared. That evening, she says, 10 Egyptian policemen broke into her family's home and ransacked the place.
Next day, the Egyptian authorities confiscated our family business, the biggest, the largest printing house in Cairo. All of a sudden, 3 families without any livelihood because they took everything, the accounts in the bank, all our assets, saying you are a Zionist, you are enemies of the country, so we are taking all of your assets without any trial.
2 years later, the Egyptian authorities expelled Zamir's family. After a short stay in France, they immigrated to Israel. Rabbi Eli Abadi, a doctor who lives in New York, remembers his mother telling him what happened in Damascus the night the Jewish state was declared.
My parents lived right next door to the synagogue, and my mother saw from her balcony how the Syrian soldiers helped the mob cross over the wall of the synagogue, enter to the synagogue, open it, burn the Torot, really the Sfarim, the books, really chasing the rabbi out of there. And she heard, of course, screams of panic in the community.
Abadi's parents fled to Lebanon, where they lived for more than 20 years. When Abadi was 5 years old, the PLO moved into Beirut after the 1967 Six-Day War.
One day, there was a huge picture, a poster-sized picture plastered on most of the mosques in Lebanon of the three rabbinical members of the Beit Din. My father was one of them, dressed in their regalia, and then the caption said, "These are the Zionist leaders who are helping Jews escape to Israel." So of course, my father became a target, the other two rabbis became a target, and they feared for their lives.
The Abadi family fled once again, ending up in Mexico. This conference will launch Israel's diplomatic efforts to get the international community to recognize that the Arab-Israeli conflict created not just Palestinian refugees, but Jewish refugees. And the first stop will likely be at the United Nations. Now, the UN has passed more than 170 resolutions on refugees in this region, but not one of them has ever mentioned the more than 850,000 Jewish refugees who were either kicked out or fled the Arab world. Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon will try to change that. On the sidelines of the upcoming UN General Assembly in New York, he will hold the first U.S. conference on the topic of Jewish refugees from Arab countries. He wants recognition of the historical crime and the issue to be part of peace negotiations.
Justice is for all, and there is no two kinds of justices or new kinds of rights. So when we come to peace with the Palestinians, normalization with the Arab countries, the issue of Jewish refugees also has to be included and addressed.
Israeli officials say that's only fair. They claim Jewish refugees from the Arab world outnumber the 750,000 Palestinians who became refugees as a result of Israel's 1948 War of Independence. Palestinians say the number is much higher. Former U.S. President Bill Clinton raised the idea of setting up a super fund to compensate both Palestinian and Jewish refugees back in 2000, but it never caught on. Today, it's Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler who has been moving the issue forward.
I passed a resolution through the House in 4 years ago, in 2008, urging the President to use all diplomatic efforts of the United States to make sure that any consideration of compensation or other accommodations to the Palestinian refugees in a Middle East peace settlement be accompanied by at least exactly equivalent compensation for the Jewish refugees. It's only just.
Nadler has proposed a bill in Congress that would require the president to show he's doing that. Nadler inspired Israeli lawmakers to pass a law in 2010 requiring any peace deal to include compensation for Arab Jewish refugees. But Israel's new push to put Jewish refugees front and center decades later has raised some eyebrows. Critics suspect the right-leaning Netanyahu government may try to use losses by Arab Jews to cancel out or lessen any future monetary compensation owed to Palestinian refugees. But so far, Israeli officials aren't talking in terms of a sum-zero game. They say they just want justice. Jordana Miller, JN1, Jerusalem.